These tapes are for demonstration purposes only. RVF Productions Incorporated assumes no liability for people or persons imitating or attempting to imitate the information seen in these tapes. Remember, the people seen in these tapes are trained professionals. Do not attempt these exercises without first taking lessons from a qualified professional. RVF Productions presents the finest in martial arts training videos. Introducing Richard Huk Planas, 8th degree master of Kenpo karate. As a true first-generation student of Ed Parker's, Huk trained at Master Parker's Pasadena School in the late 60s, and as a black belt, he managed and taught at the Pasadena School until 1975. Huk served for over 10 years as the Executive Vice President of the International Kenpo Karate Association until Master Parker's death. Huk Planas teaches not only the how-to, but the why, based on the rules and principles of the Kenpo system. As Master Parker said, he who knows how will be the student. He who knows why will be the instructor. Huk Planas is available for seminars internationally. For booking information and information on other RVF videos, call 1-800-356-VIDEO.
Hello, my name is Richard Planas, also known as Huk. That's been a long-time nickname of mine. But anyway, I'm here in Dallas at the request of one of my longtime students, Rick Fowler, to do a little series of tapes on the Kenpo system for him. And what we want to do is show a lot of what we call the rules and principles of the system. There's a lot of people teaching the how-tos, but not the whys. So we want to get into the why you do something. Is we don't want you doing what we call any meaningless motion. Kenpo, as we always say, is nothing but a set of rules or principles of motion that govern how we move. It doesn't matter what system you study or how many you can name. You only have 2 hands and 2 feet, and you block, strike, kick, and punch. It's how, when, and why you block, strike, kick, and punch that makes the difference. So what we say again is Kenpo is just a set of rules and principles of motion, and we try to teach you that following these guidelines. So let's get started. Okay, I guess we're ready to get started. Okay, now first of all, what we're learning in any martial art basically is what we call self-defense, not self-offense. So of all the techniques we do, most of the techniques start off with a block. And we have a saying that if you can't block, you can't do a technique. So you can't overstress the importance of the blocks. If you don't make your block, you won't, again, be able to do a technique. And our blocks, we put everything in an order based on what we call the in, out, up, down principle. And this is just a way to remember your directions. You always remember in, out, up, down, as that is the reverse and opposite of each other. So when we start off, we have our, we work first of all from a training horse. Again, everything has a name and a definition and a meaning. And the horse stance is what we call our training stance for training the upper body only. So we use this a lot to isolate the hands away from the rest of the body. It basically represents sitting in a chair. And again, we have many rules: point of origin rule, application rule, alternation rule. Right now we're just going to start with our hands at our side. And again, we have the inward blocks, the outward blocks, both vertical and extended, the upward blocks, and the downward blocks. And there's proper alignment and distance in engaging all these blocks. So I'm going to use Rick Fowler here to come in and explain all this. Okay, so I'll put Rick and the horse facing the camera. Now when we do an inward block, first of all, what we call inward is anything that moves toward your center line, and outward is anything that moves away from your center line. So, and up and down is just naturally understood. So our inward block, we have 2 different methods, hammering and thrusting, and we'll get to that. But the proper alignment is the end result is the same. So I want Rick to take his right hand and do an inward block. Now when we practice from our training horses, again in hand isolation, we want to basically keep our shoulders square. And we're cutting the X to the corner of the square formed by our shoulders. If I was to say like Walt Disney and I could draw an imaginary square and the shoulder line being the back of the square, his hand now would be in the front of the square. So The shoulder line is where we're moving our hand to. So this line points straight ahead. The fist is basically at eye level. Now how we get here, again, in the two methods of hammering and thrusting, what we call the thrusting is the surprise block we should never have to use, as everything again goes by general rules. Is one of our rules and principles is to keep your hands above the opponent, so your hand should never be down in the first place. We learned you basically talk with your hands, so your hands are always up, and the hammering will be the preferred block. Now, just to show the difference, go back to cock, Rick. In a training horse, when we do a thrusting inward, it's based on point of origin, so the hand is already down and it just comes up. Now, in a hammering inward, we have to have the hands high, and it will come in and hammer down. So in the training horse, to do the hammering, we have to add the cock position, and you pick this up again in principle in long one and the end of long one. So we have to say, cock your hand and then strike. So we'll alternate a few times, cock your hand and then strike, cock your hand and then strike, and cock your hand and then strike. So this cocking position is just making a statement. I understand that hammering motion requires the high cocked position and comes down, as opposed to thrusting does not require a cocked position and generally comes up. Okay, then we go to the outward block, the vertical outward first. Now the vertical outward is called the vertical because it's vertical on all sides. Like to look at this stick from the front, you say that looks vertical, but if you saw it from the side, oh, it's not vertical, I have to bring it into this position. So we want to put a level on it on all sides. So I would put my level on the arm, all sides, to make sure it's straight up and down. And then it is, again, inside the shoulder line, where the thumb is right on the line of the shoulder. Then the extended outward is called extended for two reasons. It extends farther forward and outside the square. So what he does now, he would turn his hand around and put the thumb, it's still on the shoulder line, but it's outside the square now, and it moves out to the corner of the square where the inward came to. Now, this is the used outward block, as we don't really use a vertical outward block as a block. I tell people all the time, I say, you won't find a technique where we use a vertical outward as a block. And people say, what about twirling wings, or what about this? I say, no. I says, remember the definition of a block. The definition of a block is used against a weapon in motion with no intent to hurt. You're just trying to stop the weapon. So the in motion is the key here. Remember, you can't block anything if it's nothing's coming at you. So it has to be used against a weapon in motion. So to do like twirling wings, when the person has a grab on you, all you're doing is you're spinning around, and it's really used as a check. It's not used as a block. Because, again, it's based on the rule that we kill as many birds with one stone as possible, that we never just block, you're also cocking your hand to strike, which the vertical outward does not do, and that's why the first few yellow belt techniques, that when we get into the techniques, you'll see that you're just learning these principles. Now, again, now when we're moving, before, when we did the inward block, we did a single move. Okay, now when we move on the outward, upward, and downward, we're doing what we call a dual moves, or our minor-major principle. So with this hand, what he's going to do, he's going to turn this in. So we use the other hand. The hand that's up is going to become an inward block. Go ahead and do that, Rick. Followed on the outside by the new outward block. And then this hand, to be used in alternation, becomes an inward, and the outward comes in. So a lot of systems do this, but they don't emphasize the use of the minor move. But that's very important, and let me explain this to you this way. Rick. Now, the inward motion is the only motion that what we call closes the door. So we open and close doors all the time. Now, I show this way a lot of times. Like I say, I sold Rick a TV set, and it's a bad TV set, and it doesn't work. Hope he doesn't go home and plug it in right away. So I look out my window, and here comes Rick, and he's mad. I said, oh, he must have found out the TV doesn't work. So he comes over, and he knocks on my door, and he's going to punch me in the nose. So he knocks on my door, and I open the door, and bam, he punches me in the nose. Now, he could only punch me in the nose because I opened the door. Now, that means I moved away from my center line. So now, same scenario, I say, here comes Rick. He must have found out the TV set doesn't work. He might be going to try to hit me. So I open the door, and I say, ah, shut the door. See, the inward motion is the motion that shuts the door. So now he says, well, I'll go knock on his window. So he knocks on the window, and I raise the window. This is like an upward block. Shut the window. We begin with the inward motion, you see. And this goes through the downward as well. See, so the inward motion, that's why it's used as the minor move, because you shut the door first before you bring in your major block. Okay, now, let's go through, back in, Rick. We did the outward. Let's go to the upward block. When we do our upward block, we break this into 2 moves. We want the center line like an uppercut because, again, we do use this. And then the elbow snaps out as the last move. Now, as far as in front of us, we want to keep our hand where I could put my fist behind his hand and drop it between his hand and his nose without hitting him. So this gives him some bracing angle from the front. If the hand was back too vertical, you wouldn't have any bracing angle. It would be just like having this stick and a door here. It's a bracing angle. To understand it is like propping a chair under a door. So the force here is transferred, pushing the chair to the ground, and keeps the door shut. If I just set the chair against the door, it would be easily pushed away. So we have to have our bracing angle. Then we want to see a little rim of light around the head this way. See? This gives us our clearance away from our head. Our hand also belongs to the fist, basically in line with the opposite ear. Just make sure the head is fully covered instead of being open here and possibly getting hit. Now, again, in angles, we work with basically 2 angles, angle of incident and angle of deflection. All the blocks but the upward work on what we call angle of incident. Now, in our terminology, angle of incident means basically striking square to, so there is no deflection. The upward is the one that is based on angle of deflection. It's like building a roof over your house. If you had a roof, the roof is designed from the peak so things will slide off. So anything that hits here will slide, wants to slide off and not have the arm square like a lot of systems do, where you take the blunt of the force square on the arm. That can get you in trouble. See? So we keep our angle of deflection up. Okay. Back to the, what I'm thinking about, I want to go back to the outward block. We did the extended as the one that we use. But now I want to go to the vertical outward block, the one that we don't use, and explain why we learn it. The vertical outward block is we cross-reference everything we can to our hands and feet. So a lot of times it also shows in our forms that we'll cross-reference it. If I know how to do this rule or principle with my hand, I also understand it and can do it with my feet. So this is what we call the vertical outward. It equals the cat with your foot. So this is the position that we pass through to get to all the rest of the block. So I can take this from this position. I say, okay, Rick, right from here, do an upward block. See? And then drop back to the vertical position. Right from here, do an inward block. And drop back to the vertical position. Right from here, do a downward block. And drop back to the vertical position. And do the extended outward, the one you use. So what we're doing is we're basically representing like this square that Rick's standing on, or in the center of our patch, is the intersection. You can look at this as a map. So from the intersection, we can go in any direction. Okay. And this is why we use this, again, is it equals the cat position. So we learn that, and the getting the cross to realize that from there you can go in any direction. Okay. Now, I want to get into, okay, let's do the downward first, and we'll move on. Okay. The downward block is nothing but an inward block on the bottom side of the circle, as everything is based on the circle. If you took the hand and you went completely around the circle, one way you get one set of blocks, and the opposite direction changes just one block. To point this out, let me show you this again. So let's go back to the inward block, Rick. From the inward, if you keep following the circle, it becomes a downward. To keep following the circle, it becomes the extended outward, and it goes back to the inward. So it goes inward, downward, extended outward, inward, then you just keep going around the circle. See? So you feel that. Now that's going this way around the circle. Now go back to the inward. Let's go around the circle the other way. We get the extended outward, the inside downward palm up, back to the inward, and the extended outward, inside downward palm up, back to the inward. See, so the only block that gets changed is the downward. It becomes a palm up instead of a palm down. And that's one thing we show in the system, or try to show, is that everything has a reverse and an opposite, and we give you an example of it. In fact, that's the definition of Kenpo forms. So what do Kenpo forms do? They teach you the rules and principles of motion, that everything has a reverse and an opposite, and gives you an example of it. And this is one reason, like I say, we do the inside downward palm up and the palm down, because it's just reversing the circle. Okay, that's just covers the basic blocks. Now, I want to get in a stance. Let's take the neutral bow. Now, first of all, let me do this, Rick. A lot of times, what we're learning is also what we call economy of motion. Economy of motion, a lot of people have the wrong idea. A lot of people just think it's the closest weapon, closest target. I said, well, not really. It's the closest effective weapon to the effective target. So, in other words, if your hand is real close, but it won't get the job done, that's not economy of motion. See, it's like if I had to do 40 little light jabs, doesn't equal one good cross with the right hand. Even though this is closer, like I say, it won't get the job done. See? So, economy of motion is the one that does get the job done. But again, it means also doing the most with the least. So just to point out some habits that people have. If I say down in a horse, and they go, and take 3 steps to get there, then you're throwing the economy of motion rule out the window. So don't take 3 steps to get you what you should get in 1. So when you're moving and you say down in a horse, it should be boom, 1 move into your horse. As well as any other motion you do is the most with the least. Okay, now, we also have what we call rule number 1, and that goes, rule number 1 applies to anything, any martial art, any job, any type of work, and that is called what we call establish your base. You always establish your base before you can work. If you're going to push a car, you're not going to walk up to a car and push it. You'll just get pushed back. You say, oh, I got to push this car? Okay, let me get down now. Now I'm ready to push this car. See, I established my base. I'm going to pick up a handsaw and saw off a board. I said, oh. Okay, now I'm ready to work. And this is basically your neutral bow. See, everything we do is normal, everyday stances. You don't have to be taught these stances. You do them automatically. Your body puts you in a position to be able to work effectively. I show this to people all the time, and they're amazed by it, that they don't have to really learn this. You actually already know it. And that was brought out, or pointed out, in the first movie, The Karate Kid, when Miyagi told, I can't remember his name, anyway, the kid, that, you want to learn to fight? Go wax the car. Go sand the floor. Go paint the fence. See? And then when he threw him in the ring to fight, he just says, I can't fight. He said, yes, you can. Just remember, wax the car, sand the floor, paint the fence. See? So he was showing him that what we do is everyday motion. The fallacy with that part is that if he didn't use it to fight with and cross-reference it, it would never come out. It says you have to cross-reference it. When you do a block, you say, oh, this is just like this. Oh, this is just like doing this. This parry is just like waxing the car. See? It would have to be used to actually come out. Okay, now, I want to talk about the neutral bow. When we drop back, again, to see this from the side, as I say neutral, you don't want to go 1, 2, 3 to get you there. So when we're moving, we just step back and pivot, and both feet come out, pointing in the angle to the proper alignment. Now, for the alignment, we draw a line from our opponent to our front toe. I'm going to be right in the center of this square, to our back heel, and our feet point at 45 degrees. Another way we say this is that we use the clock principle of the 6 and 12, 3, 9, just like on the patch. Now, another way we say this again is if we're facing a wall, your feet will always point in a corner. And if you're facing a corner, your feet will always point at the wall. See? Now, we stand heel and toe. To bring in another rule or principle is we never get in our own way. So if you use what we call a side horse or a fighting horse, you're breaking the rules of the system is by being in your own way. If I'm going to kick with my back foot, I have to do one of 2 things, is either get out of my way to move or go around myself. And again, the reason, because you're in your own way. When we stand heel and toe, when we're not in our own way and we have the effective use of both weapons. A misconception that a lot of people have about a neutral bow is that you're supposed to be fully covered, meaning no targets exposed. See, no, that's not the meaning, and it's not what you're trying to do. You have a happy medium, and that's why the word neutral comes in. Like a boxer can't fight basically unless he's basically facing you square. And that's why from the waist down is illegal in boxing because it hurts you because it is exposed. So to get the happy medium of full effective use of all four of your weapons, both hands and both feet, you do have to sacrifice being open. But it's, again, to the bare minimum. If I stood perfectly sideways, then I cut my target area to the minimum, but I also greatly limit the use of my weapons. If I stood perfectly square, I'd have 100% effective use of both hands and feet. But again, I expose all my target area to my opponent. So I want to get, that difference there is 90 degrees. So I want to get the happy medium. I said, well, the middle of that's 45 degrees. So that's why we stand at 45 degrees, because it's halfway between being fully open and fully closed. And I am slightly open, but again, it's the sacrificing being a little open for the effective use of your weapons. Now, when we get moving, we're basically going to work in the yellow belt techniques. We're going to work out of a neutral bow, just like short one in the first form you learn. It's basically everything out of a neutral as your basic stance. Now, what I'm thinking about, I want to talk about checks and covers. I like to think, or like people to train and think, that checking is eliminating motion and covering is anticipating motion. So when we say on guard, you put your hands up. Why did you put your hands up? Because you're ready for something that might happen. See, just like you draw your sword. So I go, okay, I'm ready to fight. See, my sword's in center line. I don't know where I'm going to have to move. Okay, so that is anticipating motion. Checking, we generally want to grab and prevent motion. So I'm going to keep in mind, and I'm always going to be pointing that out, that we're preventing motion when we're checking and not just anticipating motion. When we cover, we only close basically one line. Like I might close the 3 o'clock line, but then there's 7 other lines to pick from. And again, the system is based also on the 2 ways your opponent hits you, intentionally and unintentionally. And a lot of times the unintentional can win the fight. I'll bring that up when we start into the section on the techniques. I think we'll wrap up this part before we get into the technique section. So, back at it in a minute. Before we move on, I'd like to talk a little more about the check versus cover principle. This is, again, let me bring Rick out for this. Come on this side, Rick. Now, we have a saying, like, we're fighting, you go left neutral, Rick, right? If we're fighting and there's a distance between us, I can't do anything but cover, because I'm not Gumby. We make a statement about being Gumby where I can stretch my arms and legs out to move. So out here, all I can do is cover. And the rule is you cover until you can check. So if you just stand here and I can get in close enough, and then I can get in and say, okay, now I can check. Now I'm preventing motion. The hand is not going to hit me because I have a hold of it, and I can control his height and width zones and his depth zone, basically. So out here, again, all I'm doing is anticipating. I'm ready for motion, and now I'm preventing motion. And I always want to use the grab to eliminate the motion based, again, on the 2 ways your opponent hits you, intentionally or unintentionally. So like if Rick was going to do a defense technique where he's going to drop back and block, let's work to this side forward so they can see this. You're going to do an inward block, see, and then counter with the front hand. And here, he's closing a line. The line to his head is closed with a cover. But when he hits me, I can change my line or go around it because he's not preventing motion. If he grabs my hand, then it's not going to go anywhere, and now he's checking. See? And this is the way we like to think of what a check does, is prevent motion. I always tell people to grab and eliminate that, and I relate it a lot of times to Winnie the Pooh. When he's spinning the tiger around by the tail and the people yelling at him, let go, let go. He says, I'm not going to let go. And he says, why? And he says, because there's teeth on the other end. Talking about the tiger. And I relate it to, yeah, there's teeth on the other end. And say, your teeth are going to be on the other end. So again, we want to keep the check principle in there. Now, and remembering that when we mean check, we mean to prevent motion by grabbing. And I want to talk about the footwork timing to show a relationship on timing, that everything is based on what we call 3 timings of reverse, opposite, and eliminate the and then. And I'll do a couple of things to point this out to you. We'll go sideways here. Being in a neutral, and we do a lot of what we call switching. Now, the definition of switching is changing sides facing your opponent without losing or gaining distance. So it means, in fact, this is where I'm at. When I change sides, I still want to be in this place. Now, there's three ways I can do this. I can take my front foot to my back and then step up with my back foot. So, again, front to back and then step up. Then I have an opposite or reverse of that. I can take my back to the front and then step back. Okay, so that is the reverse of. There's only one other possible combination. If I can take my front to my back and then the back step up, and vice versa, the and then is what I'm talking about. So there's only one thing other timing I can use, and that's eliminate the and then. So I have them both go at the same time. See? And again, that is reverse, opposite, and eliminate the and then. Now, and the shuffle is the same thing. If shuffling is nothing but gauging distance, shuffles are not considered part of your techniques. They go where they're needed to make your techniques work. And again, it just represents or is gauging distance. If you need to shuffle, you shuffle. If you don't, you don't. The rule with shuffling is don't let it change the timing of the technique. It can change the power principle, but not the timing, or shouldn't change the timing. And later on, if we get that far, we'll show that in application in a technique. But again, in shuffling, we have our step drag, drag step, and push drag. So I can step with my front foot and then drag my back foot. So in reverse also, all these apply in forward and reverse. So I can step with my back foot and then drag my front foot. So if I can step and then drag, then I can drag and then step, either forward and reverse. But again, if you're listening, you heard those and thens. So the only other possible is to eliminate the and then, and that's where the push drag comes in, is both feet basically start and stop together. So when we push drag, it launches off the back foot, and you get one move out of it. And again, to point it out, is you eliminated the and then. One other thing about switching is in the economy of motion, I'm going to do this facing front so you can see this. When you switch, a lot of people will come back and just bring the foot like this. That's move number one. And then either step forward, number two, and then adjust the back foot as move number three. Or come back, turn, and then step, and still have three moves. See, so one is that economy of motion. So on the lines, if I come back and I put my heels together, my back foot is already set on the angle it's going to wind up on. And when I step up, I have two. So I have 1, 2, and I miss the adjustment step, which is the unwanted, or what we call extra steps. And we'll get into the extra step part when we get to the form part of the tape. Now, before we get into techniques, I want to point out positions. Rick, come back in. A lot of people learn the 4 ways you can face your opponent: right to right, left to left, left to right, and right to left, or whatever. They're not shown or don't know about the 16 positions. So just get right on the line there, Rick, and just, okay, now what he's in is a left neutral bow. Okay, now shorten your stance up a little and put both arms out like this. Okay, now I go left to left, and then I can be here. So I'm left to left, then how am I working, or where am I working, or my position? I'm outside of left. I can be left to left, inside of left to left, inside of right, and left to left, outside of right. So that's 4. Then when I change right to left, I can reverse it and go right to left, outside of right, inside of right, inside of left, and outside of left. So that's 8. And then when he switches his stance, gives you the other 8 for 16 possible positions that you can be in. Okay? So there are 16 positions you can face your opponent in or be in. Now, where we want to be and where we are is based, again, on point of origin, where we're at when we need to move at the time. And we start off in, most of the schools start off in the yellow belt techniques that we have a rule or principle we're trying to learn, and that's what we call in the yellow belt basically the inside rule. Now the inside, again, Rick, come in. is this is inside, meaning between the arms. Outside is when we're outside either arm. And again, outside is where you want to be as a preferred position based on the backup weapon. And if you study the weapon systems, it really points that out. Now what I'm talking about, if Rick steps in with the right punch and I'm inside, I can work because I have effective use of weapons and targets. But I say, oh, look at this. What's that? That's a cocked weapon. And it's going to come guaranteed. See, unless I prevent it. So when we're inside, we always have to worry about the backup weapon. If I went outside, I say, I don't have to worry about the backup weapon. I've zoned it where he can't use it on me or reach me with it. So but this is not the principle that we work on in the yellow belt techniques. So we learn the position and we learn the rules and principles that come in application to being inside, or what we call the inside rules. Now also, you can do this two different ways, but when, let's come on this side, Rick, I can see this better. You learn, first of all, just stand there. When you're neutral, being neutral doesn't just mean being heel and toe and weight distribution 50-50 and all this. It means the whole body is neutralized, and that's based on the 3 horizontal zones of protection. The high zone from the top of your head to your solar plexus, and the front hand's job is to take care of that. And then the solar plexus to groin area, and the back hand's job takes care of that because it picks up basically at elbow level or low. And then the leg, or the crane, takes care of the low zone. So these are the 3 horizontal zones of protection. Again, that is like checking and covering. This is just being ready for motion. In application, your hands have to go where they're needed. Now, if Rick threw a roundhouse punch at me, and I said, oh, I have to be neutral, so forgetting the footwork now, and just studying the hand motion. I said, I do the block, and I said, my front hand is high, my back hand has to be low. And then if he threw the other hand, I go, oh, now this hand is above me, and there's a gap created. See, if I leave this position to go to this hand, then this hand is still in my face. So I would have an extra move. I say, oh, wait a minute, I have to fill this gap before I can move to take care of this hand. So that gives me an extra move to fill my gap. So again, on the inside, we can have both hands up to prevent this. So when the punch comes, I say, oh, I'll be here. The other hand comes, I can handle it, and the gap is already filled. So you don't have the extra move of closing a line and checking before you move to your new line. So this is just one of the principles inside. Now, the inside rule that we're talking about in most of the yellow belt techniques is, hey, the man does have backup weapons. Come back in on this side, Rick. So the rule is that when we're inside, we have to think about this. So what rule applies, okay? Because we're inside, the only way we can eliminate the backup weapon is break the height zone, okay? Now, this will keep the man from bending over. So, I mean, bending him over will keep him from throwing the backup weapon. So that's how we break the height zone in many different ways. So right from here, I can kick to do that, and that will cancel the height zone and prevent the backup weapon from coming in. So, again, then we worry about or opening and closing the center lines, and that's what we do again in the yellow belt techniques. Is we want to cancel angle of cancellation, and then we want to keep it canceled sometimes, or we want to reopen it, and if we do reopen it, we have to follow the rules that apply to this principle also. I'll give you some examples of wrong angles. Come back on this side, Rick. Like working a technique for a lapel grab. It's a standard technique. Why did this person grab me? Oh, right. He's probably going to be trying to hit me. So I'm going to pin this hand down, again, to kill a weapon, step back for rule number 1, get me in a stance and get him out of his. And then when I do my punch to rotate and possibly sprain or break his arm, the rotation is what causes the cancellation on that hand, so he can't hit me with it. Then if I did this wrong, like I see a lot of people do, come around and hit square down here by pushing straight down, I can get hit one of 2 ways. I can bring him in, and he busts his head on my nose by accident, or he's going to say, oh, thank you for turning me back into my punch and hitting me on purpose. So this is an example of a wrong angle or method of execution. See, I understood that my first move was to cancel the center line and prevent the backup weapon from coming in. But then if I do my second angle to pull him in, I'm not applying the rules and principles. So here it's I cancel, and now I anchor the elbow to drive him away on an angle to put the shot in and keep his backup weapon canceled. So remember, the principle here that we're talking about is canceling the backup weapon and keep it canceled. We don't want to use an improper line and break a rule that will bring his backup weapon back into us. Okay, so again, that's the principle of canceling the backup weapon and keeping it canceled, not reopening. Now, I want to talk a little bit about speed, as a lot of Kenpo practitioners are starting to and always basically have been involved in too much speed. Okay, I tell people all the time that speed will nullify your majors. When we hit with minor and major power, but we really shouldn't even use these words. We should think hard and harder, not Muhammad Ali did not say float like a butterfly and sting like one too, okay, as nobody's ever been gored by a butterfly, see. So you have to keep the power. And I get stories from students, and I see in articles all the time where this guy's going to teach you how to hit somebody, you know, umpteen times in a split second. I tell people all the time, I say, this can't be done. And I say, you can, remember, you can touch somebody, but you can't hit them. Touches don't get the job done. Hits are what get the job done. And I prove this all the time. Like, I've had people come to me and say, man, you ought to see my instructor. He's so fast, he can hit you 15 times in a second or 2 seconds. I said, no, he can't. I said, he can touch me, but he can't hit me. And I said, I just walk up. All you have to do is walk over to a heavy bag and say, okay, hit this bag for me good and hard where you're going to hurt somebody. And they hit. So now hit it twice. And then bam, bam. And I hit it 3 times. They go blam, blam, blam. And it's basically almost about 3 seconds to hit it 3 times hard. Now I say, think about this. How long did it take you to hit the bag hard 3 times? And now you're trying to do a technique with 14 or 15 hits in it in half of that time? What is that telling you? Ching, or are you hitting? Remember, touches don't get the job done. Hits get the job done. So you have to keep the power. So slow down and pick up your power. Don't go for speed and let that nullify your major strikes. So remember, hard and harder, not light and then hard. Okay, now, in our power principles, too, also, we use 3 main power principles, and that's torque, backup mass, and marriage with gravity. Backup mass and marriage with gravity are the same thing, and I'll explain that. First of all, torque is just twisting. You can't move without using torque. Torque is an underlying principle in anything you do. It's like I say, you can't move without using torque. But we have techniques that are strictly torque techniques, techniques that are strictly backup mass techniques, and techniques that are strictly marriage with gravity techniques. Now your definitions, backup mass is your body weight moving in line with your strike. Now an example of this, a lot of systems will step off to the side like with a block and then punch forward and have 2 different directions. I'm stepping this way, but I'm punching this way. See? So there's a detraction. See? We say when we move, we want the punch or the strike, whatever, and your body weight moving in line with, and that is the definition. The key word there is in line. So when we talk about moving on a horizontal line, we call it backup mass. Then when we talk about moving on a vertical line, we call it marriage with gravity, as gravity is what pulls you down. So if I was going to strike down, I wouldn't be basically low and then hit in any kind of a way and raise up and move against that line. So if I'm going to strike down, I'm going to drop my body weight with it. And again, see, we're doing the same thing as our body weight is moving in line with the strike, backing up the strike, but now it's on a vertical line. And this is what we call marriage with gravity. And again, torque is twisting, which we use in many different techniques of just rotation in and out, or say when we move, you cannot move without using torque. But this is what's involved in the techniques and the principles you use, like when do you torque, how do you torque, and how much rotation should you use. And this will come in when we do the videotape. So that'll conclude this section of the tape, and the next one we'll do will be on the techniques themselves. So thank you.